understanding the burden of disease. We've neglected therapeutics, and we need to make sure that we do that as well. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Gray. I mean, that was quite packed. We might not. I mean, in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, we don't really have like a serum institute. You suggested that, but I think I'll hand over or go over to Dr. Odubanjo. He's a public health expert and the executive secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science. He was involved in the Ebola outbreak and also the COVID. So my question to you, sir, let me just put the spotlight on you, is along the line of what lessons has Nigeria learned from this pandemic, and in your case, the Ebola as well, in terms of investment in research and development, sir? How can we catch up with the rest of the world?
Well, thank you. I like the phrase by Professor Gray, science is not a luxury, in Africa. And I think clearly that COVID-19 sends across that message very clearly, in terms of the fact that the epidemiology of the disease is varied everywhere, and indeed in Nigeria. And that tells us we need that local research. We needed to find out locally effective therapies. We needed to find diagnostics, as Professor Happy said earlier. We need to look at local vaccine capacity so that we also can reduce the vaccine hesitancy, because if it's produced here, there's more faith. So I think the way to improve things is that policymakers and decision makers have to engage better and more with researchers. We need to build that synergy. There's that science policy gap, and there's that kind of mistrust between them, where the scientists believe the policymakers don't understand and don't care. The policymakers think the scientists are talking highfalutin and technical jargon, and they don't quite understand the realities on the ground. And we need to bridge that relationship such that they develop trust and also dependence on each other to deal with issues, so that when the scientist is talking, he understands the other side, and the policymaker also understands the need for science and how science works. And I say that with emphasis because sometimes, again, the policymaker wants to put in some money and wants results in 2 months. He wants his answer in 1 month. We got a request at the academy now asking for input into a strategy document in 3 days or so. And that's a bit ridiculous. You're not, if you get anything, you probably are not getting what you should get, but so there needs to be a bridge. We need to note that, the economic plans are a waste of time in this day and age without the input of science. So we have, for instance, the National Economic Committees in Nigeria, but we don't have scientists on board. We don't even have the Minister of Science and Technology there, not to talk of the President of the Nigerian Academy of Science. And yet we'll come out and give speeches that say that we know that science, technology, and innovation is what drives economy in this day and age. So we need to really put action to those words that we say. And I say also that based on COVID-19, and indeed we saw it in Ebola, that we realize from COVID, the minister mentioned, for instance, that we need the private sector very badly. We need the private sector very badly to get things running, because there are some things, apart from the money, there are some efficient systems that the private sector can bring on board to help us manage our public health system. I think I should just stop there for now in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I'll come back to you very quickly, but there was something you touched on. I just want you to just hammer on that. Now, in your experience, if you were to put in one word, the most frustrating aspects of this whole ecosystem, what would that be for you based on what you've seen? What is that one thing that if you could solve, with a snap of a finger or with a direct call from the president, what's that one thing, sir? It's
communication. It's a rather simple thing for me to answer. It's communication. I think we underestimated, what we need, what is required. We've spoken, and by no means am I trying to undermine the need for vaccines or laboratory testing and all of that. But the one thing that I said, and I believe from the get-go, is that what you need more than anything is behavioral change management. what you need is get people to do what you need them to do, including testing, because you can have the testing capacity, but the people will not go to the labs. You have the mask as a curtailing measure, but the people will not put them on. So we were depending more on using law enforcement instead of understanding that we needed to be able to communicate effectively in order to get people to change their behaviors and follow whatever the directives are that we give for their benefit. So I think that is missing, and that links to trust. The minister mentioned trust and transparency, that there's a linkage to that. And I'd been linking and talking to the communications unit of the NCDC consistently throughout this period. And I keep telling them, you are perhaps the most important unit, but I know that people will not know that. And even within your organization, you will not get that. Yeah.
But
communications will not get that.
Okay, thank you very much. So we lost you for a second, but I think the gist is very much passed across. You mentioned communication, and for academia, and basically one would say that starts at home, but also in the school, the institutions. And that means I'll be heading over to Professor Folashade Ogunshola, who is a professor of medical microbiology. She's the first woman to be appointed as provost at College of Medicine at the University of Lagos, and later deputy vice chancellor and the acting vice chancellor. Great to have you here with us now.
Thank you very much. Let me also mention that I was involved with the outbreak, the Ebola outbreak in 2014. I'm presently on the Africa CDC COVID-19 task force. And concerning communication, I think you can only communicate what the facts that you have. And I think some of our greatest problems is data. I loved what Dr. From South Africa said. Science is not a luxury because science generates the data that you will communicate. And we don't have that. We talk a lot about research, but research requires that is a long-term investment, and we have shown that we're not very good in long-term sustainability of things. The greatest problem we have is that our systems around health and education are broken. If you're going to do research in health, it requires knowledge. It requires that you have strong educational systems. It requires that you have strong healthcare systems. What we have seen across Africa generally is that we have a reactive approach to health rather than a proactive approach to health. And the proactive is where you have the research, the investments in manufacturing, the investment in human resources. And these are things that you do not suddenly, they're very capital intensive, but it means that you have a long view. What we want is a very short-term reaction. We want the answer yesterday and now. So we talk about research, but we don't fund it. We talk about research, and sometimes the academics bring it up. Let's talk about Professor Happy's the vaccines. But there is a gap between doing the research, having the product or the prototype, and commercialization. And that's where government needs to come in. What's the encouragement when we've done the research, you have a product? Taking it the next step requires government, requires the private sector, and requires a policy framework that helps to drive that. That's very missing in Africa. Essentially, people talk about research as if that's it. And I think from my point of view, you only communicate what you're doing and what exists. And it can only be authentic when people can see the value of that it's really impactful and that it's for their benefit. Nigeria has a broken system around healthcare and education, and people recognize that. So when we talk and pontificate, they don't believe us because on the ground, where's the healthcare? Because really, fundamentally, before we can start talking about preparedness builds on a system that's working, and that system is broken. So if we're really going to prepare for the next pandemic, or we're going to get the trust, we have to build the systems and make sure that they're strong. We need good health systems. we need good educational systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma. I mean, it's very, very loaded, what you said. I'm sure, even judging by the questions that are coming in, a lot of people will want to obviously point to the government. I love what you said about science generates the data you need to communicate. And for the data to be generated, funding is required. And a lot of people share the opinion that a lot of the funding, which is readily available, has been diverted to other, would I say, quote unquote, less important ventures, because without a healthy nation, there's no nation to rule. What would be your stance on this in terms of how to get the funding? Do we rely on the government, or do we go the CACOVID route, or is it a hybrid of the two?
I think it's very multifactorial, and I think this question is one that I think there's still government alone. But I don't think it's just even funding alone. Dr. Duban just said something that when government is talking about research and researchers are talking about research, we're really not necessarily saying the same thing. We need to we need to have a lot more discussion about research, because when people talk, just go and do research. What does that mean? And even for the academia, there is a sense that we are separated from what's going on in the policy arena. And so we need to have a coming together with serious discussions. I know the government has set up through Tech Fund research a group to be looking at the problems of Nigeria. That's a good step, but it's not adequate. The issue really is how much is government using its institutions? And I don't just mean the Nigerian medical research. We've set up universities. How much are we using them and giving them the challenge to do these things that they're set up to do? We don't. I'll just give a little history. We had PEPFAR for years in Nigeria. We had the AIDS epidemic, and during that period, loads of money came in. How much of that went into our institutions? What we did was set up parallel structures, which we did again in COVID. Imagine if all the money that came from the private sector was used to set up and strengthen the healthcare facilities to do what they're supposed to do. Even when this is over, those structures will remain. The people you have strengthened, the system you have strengthened. But what we do is we set up parallel structures. And I think as a nation, we need to start looking at this again. When we have these epidemics, which can really be a springboard, how much are we thinking of what the monies coming in can be used to improve the system we have so that our tomorrow is better? We don't. We just set up parallel structures. We look at it on the short term. We do things. I mean, we need to do a bit of that. But I see us not even attempting to really strengthen the systems. I saw it better in COVID than I've seen it in other epidemics. So maybe we're beginning to learn. And I guess part of that really was that COVID is affecting both the rich and the poor. And so everybody was trapped here. So we had no choice but to, start looking at our healthcare systems and start to at least add some funding to them to strengthen them. So I think that issue of research in terms of preparedness is going to be a long conversation. But there are many things. I think we need to decolonize. We need to, in our thinking, because we're always looking outwards. We're always looking to experts from everywhere. But it's the experts in here that live the problems, that really understand the context of our problems. And we have very trained manpower. What we need to do is use them. And we need to do that in between epidemics so that they are also ready for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That is I mean, I had a lot of takeaways from that particular one. I'll summarize them, but I need to go over to Professor Oyewale Tomori, world-renowned professor of virology with more than 40 years of experience. He's led research into the study of several viral infections, contributing significantly to research in polio, Lassa fever, and the Orungu virus. Now, good morning, sir, just to make sure you're there.
Morning, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Is there a chance of us seeing you, or we still want to?
As I told you, my modem is quite slow, so just leave me as I am. Otherwise, you won't see me at all. You won't hear me. Okay. So let me just talk. Don't worry about my face.
Okay, sir. No problem. So I wanted to find out from you, sir. I mean, over 40 years, you've been through a lot of these, what I call them, pandemics. What has been, in your opinion, the gaps and the gains? So, for example, Professor Ogunshola mentioned that we're constrained and forced to make it work for COVID, and that's because we're reacting. We're not being proactive. But in all your years of experience to date, what have been the gaps and the gains of pandemics in the country generally?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll spread it also to Africa. So what I'm saying about Nigeria probably goes for most of the African countries, except a few. The Honorable Minister came and scratched the surface. And you had this thing. What you didn't hear is what's in between. The devil is in the details, not what the minister said. Maybe Christian Happy came in and opened up a little bit of the details. And then Folashade followed with this thing. I'm going to the roots. Two things I would like to make before we start saying the same thing we're saying. First of all, we learn lessons and forget them as fast as we learn them. That's the first problem we have. It's not that we're not learning lessons, but we forget them almost immediately. Each time we boast about the 2014 Ebola, whatever Nigeria did, what followed in 2015? What followed in 2016? We had Lassa. It got worse in 2016, got worse in 2017, got worse in 2018 when it became, we thought was the worst, got worse in 2019. This year we're getting less because, not because it's bad, but because COVID has covered everything. So the only way our preparedness, is measured by how far the difference is between the epidemics. We prepare now. I mean, you can only prepare as much as your response depends on how well you prepare. And the longer the spaces between the epidemics, the more we forget what we learned, and therefore we become the scramble. The minister told us Nigeria started build up laboratories. We shouldn't be building up laboratories now, 60 years after independence. And that's what I told her this thing. So if we started with 2, we should be ashamed of ourselves that when COVID came, we only started with 2 laboratories. 60 years after independence, we shouldn't be talking about that. And we are counting those ones as successes, when we should be ashamed of all those little things. So year in, year out, we're having that problem. Secondly, the whole of Africa itself, we're disunited in Africa. Our leaders are controlled by all those things. Now there's a frenzy now to build a COVID vaccine all over Africa. Hubs here. Years ago, the African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative set up a committee that was looking at this issue of vaccine production in Africa. And they were talking of regional setups. Not every producing the same vaccine, but different vaccines, so that if A produces one type of vaccine, all of Africa will buy. What are we getting now? The European company is coming in and disrupting all those things. Africa is running helter-skelter. After getting money from Europe, getting money from this, getting money from that, and it becomes a bilateral relationship. When Senegal produces this COVID, who is going to buy it? What's the population of Senegal? So even the things we've done in the past for our own good, we are allowing other people from outside to do with us. Finally, I mean, I just want to talk about this thing. One lesson you talk about history or stories. Let me give you a good history about what is happening. Take the so-called green pass from Europe, when they said, if you don't use my COVID vaccine or whatever, then you don't have a green pass. And people were saying, oh, the Europeans have been this. I said, no, you are the one that is, sorry to use the word, you are the one that is the fool. Yeah, Europe is not discriminating against Africa. He's saying the same thing for China. He's saying the same thing for India. But what did India do today? India got up and said, if you don't use my COVID, you can't come to my country. Europe now has to come back on the bargaining table. When we are talking about COVID vaccine diplomacy, when you bring nothing to the table, you get a rotten deal. And that's what we are getting in Africa. We are bringing nothing into the discussion, and that's where we are. Today, India can argue with Europe and say, okay, I don't want to come to your country, but none of your people will come to my country if you don't use my COVID. That's where the strength comes in. And that's where all our colleagues are talking. Invest in your research. Invest in those other things so that you don't become, you don't become the ball that everybody plays around. Nigeria is putting money in and came up with I don't know how many billions to do research. And they put 600,000 here, 1,000 here. Over what? You don't have the foundation for doing the research. Where are they going to do it? These are the basic issues we are not. When won't be bent? His legs are knock knee. So you address not the luggage, you address the knock knee. That's the thing, and that's the problem with Africa. We've not been addressing those basic foundations with problems we had since 1960 years of independence, and we're running again helter skelter. We have a few African leaders, like Ramaphosa in this thing, who are proactive. There are four groups of countries over preparedness in Africa. There are not Africa, there are the proactive countries. Those are the European countries. Even before the vaccine came, they went out and took a gamble and bought, not just one, they bought in different places in case one or two would not work. There are the inactive countries. Nigeria is not even among the inactive countries. The inactive countries are the ones who were waiting for donation. When donation did not arrive, what did they do? They went and looked for vaccine themselves. Then there are the no active countries like us in Nigeria. Even when the donation has not arrived, we're still not looking for vaccine. How can you prepare? Let me stop there before you. So let's stop pretending amongst ourselves and bringing all these theories. The reality on ground is the fact that we are not doing what we should do. Over.
Thank you very much. One cannot ignore the passion in your voice. And I really appreciate that. After over 40 years, you're still very driven and appreciate that. I'll move over quickly back to Professor Gray. I wanted to touch on the issue of collaboration based on your experience so far. And I'm just going to put it very bluntly. Have there been any Pan-African collaborations that you know of in recent times to tackle this? Like Professor Tomori said, has there been synergy between African states that you're aware of that works?
Not enough. I don't think there's been enough collaboration. I think we need to build trust in the continent. There's been some bilateral support of various countries, but we haven't, as a continent, thrown all our scientists together to collaborate in an effective fashion. So some synergy, but not enough. We need to demand more collaboration. We need to demand more work on trust between countries, and we need to make sure that we don't put our own personal interests at heart, but look at the collective of Africa. So I think it's time that all African scientists work together. We have brilliant African scientists on this continent, and we need to work together.
Okay, Professor Happy, would you like to chime in on that as well? Let me just give you a quick second to get your camera on. For those joining us, great to have you here with us. The questions are coming in, so please send in your questions either to the chat room, or you can tweet or on Facebook as well. We're streaming this live. Thank you to all of you who have done so so far. Professor Happy, yeah, I just wanted you to touching on that in terms of the collaboration and what exactly is holding us back as a nation or as a continent.
When you talk about collaboration, can you collaborate in Africa? The answer is no. How is it easy to move from one African country to the other? How do you collaborate in that context? I think our leadership reinforced so hard the colonial, what I call immigration laws and rules, that is practically impossible to talk to the next scientist to the next door. So, and in a continent whereby you cannot move banana from one country A to country B, when country B is suffering of hunger, how do you move even vaccines or diagnostics if you produce them? So I think, it is a shame for Africa that having sat down in Berlin in 1884 and divided this continent on the table, Africans actually took that and ran even further with that notion than the colonial masters, and this is post-colonialism. So how do you think that you can collaborate in this continent where it's practically impossible to move from one country to the other? We're talking about African Union. There is no unity in the African Union. Let's be factual. So how do you work in a place, in a continent whereby it's easier to move, to jet out of Africa and go and share knowledge in Europe and America than to go from one country in Africa to another? Collaboration is practically impossible. Assume for a minute that, we had a vaccine that we have, and then we want South African expert, we want expert from Uganda or Kenya and some other countries in Africa to come together. How easy is it for them to obtain visas, for instance, to either move from Nigeria to South Africa or from those countries to Nigeria to come and sit down and collaborate? So these are just facts. And then this is profound. We shouldn't just be fooling ourselves and say that we are preparing. Break down these barriers, break down these silos. You can't make progress if you don't break down all these barriers and silos. And all of this is actually due by, our leadership that have failed us completely. We are here today talking about preparedness and vaccines and everything. I asked the question in the beginning, did Africa make an attempt to develop diagnostics and vaccine? The answer was yes. Professor Atomori alluded to it. Where are we with it? We refuse deliberately to believe in ourselves. And in order to, and then we are just so good at begging and good at just waiting for others to come and give us a solution to our problems. Professor Ogunshade alluded to that. We have enough resources both within and in the diaspora to solve our problem. But do we believe in ourselves? I think we've gotten to a point whereby we've been told so many times over the past how many decades that we are good for nothing, that we don't even believe in what we can do. So the truth of the matter is, there's a need for Africa to reinvent itself and to refund itself. And it's only by breaking the silos and the barriers that we can actually come as a people and collaborate. Even within the country, do you see collaboration within institutions in the country? When I talk about collaboration, I'm talking effective collaboration. No. How can you have research and find solution to problem to even future pandemic when institutions don't talk to themselves? When people, are rather guided by ego than scientific, merit, and where people can agree to come together to work to solve problems than to say it is the I syndrome. So these are issues. And I think it's very important that at this stage, looking forward, we should try as much as possible to break down our barriers and our differences and come together and address problems, African problems within Africa, with African perspective, and take into account the reality on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Happy. I think you hit the nail on the head. And if there was going to be a takeaway from this, for me, I've seen that communication is at the foundation of the structure that we need as a continent. Once there's communication, then we can effectively either maybe raise the funds or create the institutions or reinvent or revitalize the established institutions that are meant to address such issues. And from that level, you can move on to effective collaboration, exchange of data, information. And once there's a solution, I think it makes your case a bit stronger. And when it comes to issue of collaboration in other sectors, for example, in entertainment, in the music sector, we've seen that, and Nollywood, for example, we've seen how the sheer force of the drive and the will for Africans to move beyond the restrictions of the government, beyond the restrictions of borders, with the use of technology. And I think technology has a very large role to play in all of this. But with that said, thank you very much to all our panelists, and just want to give a quick shout out to our partners. The academic partner of this particular conversation is the Nigerian Academy of Sciences. We also have media partners. Thank you to Punch Media Foundation, News Central, and Nigeria Info for this. I think one or two of them are streaming this conversation live as well. So we're heading back to our Q&A for the next 15 minutes so that we can hit our target of 12 noon. It has been quite an engaging conversation, infectious, if I can use that word. And the points being made here are extremely, extremely important. As a citizen from the outside looking in, you will think that with all these monies being mentioned in all these countries and all these vaccines being produced, that there will be a backdoor synergy. But it's very obvious from this conversation that every country on the continent is just going on their own, trying to solve the problem on their own. And one will take the adage of the broom. The broom, if for those who know the broom, the traditional broom, one stick cannot sweep a room, but when the sticks come together, they form a thick broom, which is more effective. And I think the collaboration is one that one needs to really look into. And of course, this conversation is brought to you by The Conversation Africa. We have going straight into the Q&As. If your question is addressed to any particular speaker, please highlight that in your questions. And the team putting together the questions will get to me as well. So this is from Facebook. Maybe for Professor Folashade. The question from Farzane Berozi. One source of key data during the pandemic has been excess deaths. Is this data available for Nigeria? Okay, so let me just turn to, we can highlight Professor Folashade for that one.
Thank you. I can't start my video, but I'll answer.
Oh, okay,
we don't. Okay. Thank you. We don't have the data for deaths. We don't have accurate data for deaths. However, it is quite clear that we don't have that kind of excess mortality that you're seeing in Europe and the US. And the reason in most of Africa, I'm not saying we don't have any, for example, in Nigeria, we don't have that kind of excess mortality. And I'll explain why I said so. If you have the excess mortality, it is obvious. You can't hide it. So what you might not have is people attribute it to COVID. They may not attribute it to COVID, but you will see it. So, but we're not seeing that kind of excess mortality. In fact, there was some data that came out last year and that did not show that much. There wasn't a major increase between our death rates from 2019 to 2020 at that time. Even till now, you don't have anything massive. So we don't have accurate data, but we also don't have the kind of excess mortality. I want to remind us that when there was some mortality increases in Kano, the grave diggers screamed. So they didn't know what it was about, but they knew something was wrong. So we're not seeing that. And the reasons could be numerous. I have a few ideas about that, but we don't have that kind of excess mortality in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very, very, very much for that. Personally, I've always been, I can't scientifically prove this, but in the slums of places, at least to the best of my knowledge in Nigeria, in Lagos, you find out that a lot of the people, they really even don't know what is going on with COVID. They're going about their businesses. They're not affected. Some are theorizing that, this COVID is for, the upper class, the rich. What's your take on this from your experience so far? And then I'll move on to the next question.
Okay. I'll say this. From the data that exists, clearly infection is going on. But they're not coming down sick, and hospitalization at that level is not happening the way we were scared it would happen. And one of the things that, in my mind, I haven't got the data to prove that, is that if you think about the people in our slums, many of them live outside. They're not living, even though they're in those little rooms, is somewhere they go to do things, but you find them sleeping on their corridors, they're even in the markets, they're in the open air. And my suspicion, it's a suspicion, is that if you think about it, ventilation reduces the aerosol concentration. So they are getting infected, but not by concentrated aerosol transmission. So they get enough to be infected and probably develop some immunity, but not enough to get sick. Then when you change that to the elites, we're sitting in air conditioners, closed windows. Any COVID in the air is concentrated and recycled. It's not going out. Air conditioners don't, there's no intake of fresh air. So we're sitting in closed systems, and you'll see that our rates there are much higher, of coming down with hospitalizations. I mean, it's not an exact thing, but it's just one of the things. There may be other reasons, but that's one of the things that comes to my mind. Lifestyle.
Fantastic. I've always wondered. I've always wondered as well. So I'll be getting rid of my air conditioning now in a couple of minutes, and I'm going to throw open the windows. We have here from Natasha. This is Natasha. The speakers have eloquently outlined the challenges, but as eminent personalities and influencers in their sphere, can they also share the solutions? Are there practical means to be implemented within academia and research to incentivize Africa collaboration, for example? I'll throw this question open to the floor. Is there anyone that is willing to, any of the panelists that is willing to address this one?
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Yes,
this is Tomori. I think we all keep looking for solution. The solution is in us. It's in me, it's in you, as an individual. But when we keep talking, I saw another question when somebody was saying, oh, the minister, professional they become government people and do the same thing. It boils down to you. It boils down to me. It boils down to what I would do. As a professional, I will not go into, first of all, I won't be a minister. But if I were a minister, I know I won't last. Because I will stand by my own conviction. Many of us who are here, sitting down here, and many of us, when they got down to brass tack, when taking the right decision, we'll take the right decision. So let's not shift the point to politicians and all things. On your individual space where you are, what are you doing? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. I mean, the leadership, the other day there was a story about one Merkel, when she finished, the entire city of Bonn came out clapping for her because of her individual activity. You as an individual, and the people who are asking the questions, what are you doing where you are? These are the questions you'll be asking ourselves. And so throwing into a public thing. Do something. Literally doing the oasis of whatever, we spread out to become the ocean that we want it to be. 40, 50 years we've been at this thing. I've not changed my mind. Have you changed your mind in your own place? These are the questions you'll be asking ourselves. And start turning around and asking people, well, what is the body they are going to do? Over.
I completely agree with you. I mean, just to take from taking an example from even Dr. Stella Adedevo, and God bless in loving memory, where she took a stand. It's all about individualism, and I think in Africa we're used to wanting to push the buck to the government without realizing that the government is made up of people like you and me. So I completely agree with you on that one. I think somebody else wanted to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the quickest way to get people to collaborate across the countries that we've found is to have to put money on the table and to have a joint request for a grant, so that basically scientists are forced to collaborate. So what we usually do is we work with other countries and we both put money aside and we do an RFA and say this is what has to happen, and then scientists are forced to find collaborators in the other country and submit a competitive grant. So that's been one way that we've been able to build relationships and collaborations between scientists by getting them to apply jointly for research grants.
I want to be the devil's advocate in this instance, and I wanted to ask this question. Africa is a very unique continent in terms of our mindset. We always make reference to a lot of European ways, but their mindset is completely different. Africans sometimes feel entitled. There's the issue of ego. There's the issue of tradition and culture, where a certain culture or group might not want to work with another for whatever reason. Do you think this will be a stumbling block in terms of the collaboration on the continent?
When there's money on the table, everybody will work together.
Some might argue that if there's money on the table, people might not work together. But anyway,
if it's conditioned to access it, then they'll work together. So people put aside their egos when the conditions of the grant say that it has to be collaboration. You can force the collaboration by doing these kind of grants. They really have worked for us in South Africa. We've been forced to work with BRICS. We've been forced to work with Sudan. We've been forced to work with the UK, with America, with Zimbabwe. So it has worked. We've made our scientists go and find collaborators in other parts of the world. So let's do a Nigerian, South African collaboration I'll put some money on the table and you put some money on the table, and we'll do a joint RFA, and we'll get our scientists to work together. For goodness sake, the North and the South.
I'm looking forward to that. I'll bring the food. I
can add to that and say it works very well for South Africa because South Africa knows how to fund research and education. So because you put the money on the table and other people to put money on the table, then you have collaboration. In many other African countries, they don't put money on the table, and therefore, when you want, you want joint funding, you expect others to put equal money on the table. And what happens when that doesn't come? Then you have a situation whereby that collaboration is skewed in one direction, and as such, you can have equity in the whole process. So I think in this saying, we're looking forward. African countries, as you mentioned before, research is not a luxury. African countries should understand that their security and their future is actually about bound in funding research so that solutions can be preferred to the problem that is actually plaguing their economy, plaguing their health, and plaguing their development. So clearly, it's really, collaboration can be very easy if countries decide to invest into the areas where you want people to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to that, or should I say just sort of bring that together, that one of the greatest problems I think we have, and which we need as African countries to go forward in, is to recognize that putting money in research is the greatest preparedness that we can have, because it's going to find out what our problems are, get the solutions before the crisis occurs. Not when the crisis occurs and then we start talking of short-term preparedness. This is the real preparedness that strengthens all our institutions and makes sure that we don't have too many crises. And I think that's the sort of discussions we need to be having. And to also let us say to all of us, imagine 1 billion people buying your goods. We need to break down those barriers between African countries, and we need to decolonize in our mind. That's the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very mumuch. Thank you very much, Professor. We have a quick comment here, more like a contribution. This is from Catherine Koyobotungi. Hope I got that right. I hear the frustration among the panelists about how we need to do more as Africans. Other than political leadership, Africa has many stakeholders. We are all Africans, and some solutions will have to come from us, academics and scientists, as well as everyone else. I completely agree with you, Catherine. Thank you for that. I think there's this exodus or influx of, especially in America, where a lot of African Americans are finding their roots. They're coming back home. I think Ghana will attest to this, where a lot of very popular people and celebrities are coming home. In the academia, I wouldn't want to mirror that. That influx, yes, it's time. And I think I'll just make this the last question before we round up today. It's been quite interesting. Is what are the incentives to get the great minds from outside Africa to come back home and invest, put money on the table, either as private or public participants? What do you think will make that happen?
Is that for me?
And this is open to anyone. It's open to everyone. Preferably.
Can I pitch in, or is Shadi talking first?
Prof, I'll let you speak first.
Just to say that the question is, what made people leave the country the first time? First reason. Why do we have people draining away from Africa? Because the environment was no longer conducive for them to function. There are some people who grew up in this African condition who never left this country because the condition was there. But the condition became toxic and people moved out. Until we repair that, we're not going to get anybody coming back. What do you want to come back to when that was the reason why you left in the first place? Look at it, go back to, again, we talk about history. I grew up with having a lot of Indians as my teachers. And people from Ghana, everybody came to Nigeria when the condition was good. Then everything became upside down. Industries left, people left. And the Indians are up to date because their government made their environment conducive to them. If we make our conditions conducive, the younger people will come, and they will come back. So it's brought back to the place that we're saying it involves the public, it involves me, it involves everybody to get that condition we had before. Spend your money the right way. The money we're wasting in Africa, could have been done to improve our situation. Over.
Thank you very much.
On a final note, Professor, thank you very much.
Yes, just some.
Go ahead.
That we do have some that technology is helping a bit, that you don't need to come back, but we can have the value of your mind. COVID in a way has accelerated that, so that we're talking with the minds across great divides without them necessarily coming back. So some of them are beginning to give lectures at home, are beginning to mentor from across the divide, because though they left because of the toxicity, their hearts are still here. So I think technology will ameliorate some of that, but we really still need to fix the systems, because the e-platform and the virtual world does not quite replace the presence on ground where they're part of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And on a final word, I think I'll just give the floor to Professor Odubanjo. And this question is very direct, maybe a scorecard. How prepared is Nigeria for the next pandemic, based on everything you've heard so far?
Well, first, thanks for the professorship. Simply put,
sorry,
that's conferred by you. So that's great.
In view.
Okay, great. It's a simple phrase. We're not prepared. We're not prepared. So that's the real takeaway. And if we do all the things that have been said and we address them, maybe we'll be prepared, but we're not prepared. No.
I agree with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't think you were going to disagree, Prof. But thank you very much. As bitter as this might sound, I think one of the first steps to solving a problem is identifying it and acknowledging that you do have a problem. And the problem is that we are not ready for the next pandemic. The problem is that the communication is not effective. The problem is that the funding, the proper funding and the proper management of the fund has not been achieved. And without effective communication, we can't get funding. And without that, we can't get data that drives the science, that drives the communication, that drives the solution. And in a nutshell, we do have a lot of work as a continent in terms of collaboration. Is there a possibility? Yes. Do we have the capable hands? Yes. Do we have the funding? I believe very much so, because we've seen our leaders, spend money in other areas that we believe might not be as a priority as health and the welfare of the nation. So I guess it's just about driving a narrative. I wish the Honorable Minister was here to listen and hear all of this, because it can start from his own end, a minister reaching out to South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, whatever the case might be, and start that collaboration and pay action and not just lip service to this. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time, the panelists, those of you who contributed, those of you viewing, watching, wherever you are in the world, we thank you very much for taking the time to be here. The Conversation Africa will continue the conversation in Africa by Africans, for Africans, without sounding too cliche. But the idea is to move the continent to the next level, and I believe we have everything to do so. I'll hand over at this point to give the closing remarks, talking about the editor of the Conversation Africa. Please do make welcome Jabulan.
To the Honorable Minister, obviously in absentia, the esteemed members of the panel, and the wonderful ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the great honor that you have done the Conversation Africa by participating in this dialogue on science and policy, which we have co-hosted with our dear friends from the Nigerian Academy of Science. The conversation platform was founded to make knowledge and expertise of the academic and research communities accessible to the public. We exist for no other purpose. So we are most grateful that you have made time today to share your expertise and insights on the intersection of science and policy, in particular at a time like this when the whole world is in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
So I just wanted to get the correct pronunciation of your surname. If you noticed, I've been rehearsing, but for some reason it just doesn't stick. So I'll need your help on this for future reference, sir. How would I pronounce that properly?
Sikakane.
There was no way I was going to get that. There was no way I was going to get that. Thank you very much, sir. And great work to you and the team for putting this together. The conversation is still ongoing and going on. Please ensure that you do have the takeaway from this particular conversation. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this time to say a big shout out to the team in Nigeria, especially that I've been working with in London and South Africa, that has made this Ogechi, Candice, of course, my Oga at the top, in terms of the editor himself, talking about the one and only Adejunwa Ashoyinka Usifo, our technical guy. Thank you very much for this. It has been quite rewarding. To all our panelists, it was and it is profound, your dedication and your consistent dedication in your line of work. You've had every reason to just look the other way, but you've kept it going. And I think Africa thanks you for your passion of love. And we pray that all of this comes together to take the continent to the next level, and more importantly, to solve the problems that we have. I am Gbemileke Oscar Oyinson, better known as Oscar Oyinson, or Oscar in the City. And till the next conversation, have a wonderful day, a productive day. Stay safe, and God be with you. Bye-bye for now.